Greetings, loved ones. Today we're going to talk about the 7 steps of healing from domestic violence. Help us get these messages out. Please subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit that like button. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And please share these messages with others. You never know, just by doing so, you could save a life. So today we're going to talk about the 7 steps of healing from domestic violence. The first time Nancy came into counseling, she had a hard time looking at her therapist. Embarrassed and ashamed of the bruises on her body, the mental torture from her spouse, and sexual acts he coerced her into doing, she struggled to talk. She believed that she deserved to be treated this way, and her actions were causing his rage. Nancy minimized his acts by making excuses for his abusive behavior and blaming herself. And it took a while for Nancy to summon the courage to leave her husband. Once she did, she thought all of her problems would be over and she would be healed. However, what she thought was the finish of a race was really just the beginning. It took her more than a year to recover from her trauma and get to a place of feeling at peace. And here's how she did it. Number 1, safety first. The healing process begins when the victim of abuse is finally away from their abuser. Unfortunately, this step can take months or even years of planning and preparation before it can become a reality. Safety means that the person is physically away from their attacker and can sleep without fear. After Nancy left, she had a hard time believing she was safe and needed the reassurance of others, literally saying to her, "You are safe," over and over and over until it began to feel real. Number 2, you need to stabilize the environment. The temptation of therapists is to dive into the healing process after a victim is deemed safe. But doing this before the stabilization of a new environment can re-traumatize. Rather, the victim needs a period of rest to adjust to a new normal before the therapeutic work begins. The length of this necessary step is dictated solely by the victim and the amount of abuse they endured. It took several months before Nancy felt like she could breathe again as the confused fog of abuse lifted. Number 3 is to support unconditionally. Between her therapist and 2 close friends, Nancy felt loved unconditionally, even when she talked about how much she missed her abusive husband. It was as if Nancy was forgetting the trauma and only remembering the good times they shared. One of her family members became so frustrated with Nancy's sadness that they yelled at her and pulled away. And this was painful for Nancy, but the continued support of her 2 friends more than made up for the lack of family support. Number 4 is share experiences. One of the most helpful steps to recovery from abuse is to find a support group with other victims of abuse. This shared common experience allows a person to realize that they are not alone in their abusive encounters. Abuse is isolating, personal, degrading, humiliating, and shameful. Knowing that other intelligent, beautiful, talented, and kind women have been abused is both saddening and relieving. Nancy's support group gave her additional people that she could lean on who understood from their own experience what she was going through. Number 5 is to settle incidents. This is often the most difficult step from an awareness perspective. As the obvious abuse is recounted, new obscure abuse comes to light. Most victims don't even realize the extent of their abuse until they reach this step, and when they do, it can be overwhelming and will likely restart the grieving process all over again. As Nancy examined each major traumatic incident and in the middle of this, other types of abuse surfaced, she came to see that she was also mentally, verbally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and sexually abused in addition to her physical abuse. Processing this information was hard at first, but it put a nail in the coffin of her abusive relationship for good. There was no turning back now for Nancy. Number 6 is to stitch wounds. To stitch the wounds of Nancy's abuse, she needed to rewrite her internal dialogue of what happened. In the past, she would minimize his contribution to an incident, and she would take excessive responsibility for his behavior. When she stopped doing this and instead held him responsible for his actions, things changed. Nancy no longer believed that she was worthless or deserving of his abusive treatment. And as time progressed, she began to take pride in her scars as evidence of her strength, determination, fortitude, and perseverance. Number 7 is set standards. The final step towards Nancy's healing was to set new standards for how she expected to be treated. This became the boundaries of what is acceptable behavior. Anytime a person would violate one of her limitations, she would confront them. If they demonstrated respect by their actions and not words, Nancy would remain in the relationship. If they did not, she cut them off and ended things. These new standards helped to reduce her fear that she would re-enter into another abusive relationship. It is important to note that abuse can happen to anyone in any relationship. While this teaching highlights Nancy's experience of abuse from her husband, a man can also be the victim of abuse from his wife. Partner relationships, parent-child relationships, and friendships, they can be abusive as well. It is not the nature of the relationship or the sensitivity of the victim that determines abusiveness. Rather, it is the actions of the abuser. With 1 in 3 women experiencing domestic violence worldwide and 15 million children witnessing the violence each year, the question is not if you will encounter a victim of violence. The question before God is, what will you do when you do encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice. Those who suffer violence need to know that those who love them and those who don't even know them will step out and reach out to them, give them the help and the courage they need to leave before it's too late. Help us get these messages out. Subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit the like button. Hit the notification bell. And please share these messages with others. Someone who sees them may realize they're a victim of abuse and leave. Someone who sees them may recognize abuse in someone they know and help them to leave. You could actually save a life by sharing these videos. If you're a victim of violence, listen to me. You are valued. You are loved. You're intelligent. You are beautiful. And God does not want you to suffer violence. He wants you to live free in peace and tranquility. You're not alone. There is a way out. It's not your fault. That's the one truth to believe. Remember, it's not your fault. And abuse is not love. If you're a victim of violence, reach out to someone today. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, call 911 for help. And if you know of a child suffering violence, tell the authorities. In our next episode, we're going to talk about trauma and restoring faith. Until then, God bless you.